Okay, Zok Tehillah Gemara weiter. We'll do a quick run through the Mishnah because that's really what the subject matter of the Gemara is. The rocks that are needed for it, the Gemara will explain what it's needed for in detail. And we discussed this earlier in the parak. There were posts that were used to support the vines, even if those posts are currently loose in the field, but their exclusive purpose is to service the vines that will grow in the field. They're included in the sale. Grain that's not yet harvested. Sometimes there would be a little area where reeds would grow. That's not really what the function of the field is for. The field is to grow grain. Nevertheless, if it's a small amount, it will be bottled to the field. If there's a little hut, it's not really so permanent, it's built loose, but that's included because it's not significant. Yes, the charuf is a boxer tree. When it was fully grown, it was such a significant item, it would be perceived as a separate entity than the field itself. But when it's small and it's a sapling, then it would be left in the field. One of the ways you would know if a charuf is mature is if they would graft into it. So if it's she'enei murkav, it would be included with the field. And similarly with besulas hashikma, the sycamore tree was a very big and noticed tree, and often would not be included in the sale. But if it's a sapling, it would be included. However, that all-inclusive type of language, except for benkach, there's a huge area of chitzas hakonim. Clearly, that's not part of the field. It's not bottled to the field. That would be considered a separate area. Not a shumira, a little pot that's made with tit. It's very significant. Is sadon hashik. Okay, gewaltig. Let's see the Heilige Gemara. My avonim shein letzarcha. What are these stones in the field that we call them there for the purpose of the field? Hacha targimu, here they explained it as avnei da akva. The Rashbam says avnei da akva is after they cut the stalks of wheat, they want to leave them there. They let them lie in the field to dry out, but they could blow away in the wind. Therefore, paperweights, basically. Ula said no, it's something else. It's avanim hasadurais legeder. Sadurais is an interesting language. Sadurais b'sech hasada, they're organized in a field. Lasois geder l'sada. So it sounds like they're not yet a geder, but they're organized and prepared to build a fence with. I think we'll see how the Gemara develops. So basically, stones piled up neatly on a skid, not scattered. Fact the Gemara merely piled up, as the Rashbam says, v'yafagav the einon tzedurais, even though they're not set up, lined up. We still consider them like they're very much servicing the property, so they would be included in the sale of the property. Tani sturais. Let's learn sturais. In other words, we'd have to either say pshat in the brisa or amend the brisa that in order for them to be considered part of the field, the status of the field, they would have to be seduras. Hacha targimu abnei avnei da'ak. Here we didn't learn like ula that it's stones to be used for a fence. Rather, we learned that it's stones to be used as weights to weigh down the grain so they shouldn't blow away. Zakt Gemara, Reb Meir. We're going to see that we have a machloikis, Reb Meir and the Chachamim, about how connected something is to the field. If you remember, right at the beginning of our parak, the Gemara asked, Lema mas nisin, the like Reb Meir, because your Meir holds that if it's kavua, it's connected to the field. If you remember, we had that shaila. So let's have a look at the Rashbam who introduces to us Reb Meir. The Reb Meir, the Amar beperk hamoicher is a sfina. He teaches us in perk hamoicher is a sfina. Mochar kerem, if you sold a kerem, mochar tashmishe kerem. It also includes the utilities of the kerem. Ushminan, we learned the also lafluga Rabbanan. In what way is he arguing with the Rabbanan? The Rabbanan also say that these konim are included. So what is Reb Meir adding to be included in the sale that the Rabbanan disagree with? So he's arguing on the Rabbanan Ulemeimar to teach us. Even those tashmishan that are not sold together with the kerem, according to the Rabbanan, the loy kvi kol kach, they're not so connected to the kerem. Reb Meir muchun. Reb Meir considers them part of the sale. The hilchach, and therefore the chol tashmishe kerem v'soda shnuyim b'mishnasenu. In every case of the Mishnah, whenever we're discussing asada kerem, any type of property that grows crops, there's a difference of opinion between Reb Meir and the Chachamim that has to be defined in what practical sense it makes a chiluk. Bin lefushe hechidami Reb Meir mocher u'Rabban einu mocher. Reb Meir made it clear that he considers more items connected to the property that would be included in its sale more than the Rabbanan. But he only mentioned it generally. So in each Mishnah that discusses such halachas, we have to clarify what does Reb Meir hold and what does the Chacham hold. So that's what we're doing right now. V'hilcha, Reb Meir hani avnei the akva, the avnei the akva that we described, that we describe over here as these big stones in the field. Muchurinen b'chlal sadeh. Why? Kiven the misukanois u'mizumonois l'tzarech. They're musukah, they're prepared. Musukah means you actually do something to the stone, and you also prepare them to service the stocks. So let's have a look inside the Gemara again. L'Reb Meir, the Mesaknon, Afalgav, D'Loi Machsad, even though they're not on them, they're not in the field. As the Rashbam adds, V'Afalgav D'Loi Machsad, She'enu Munoches B'Soich HaSada, Elachutz L'Sada. Even if they're sitting out of the field, they're not in the field, but these are those designated stones that are prepared to do this with, to be paperweights. These are still included. The lahachi ahani ma'id Amar Reb Meir mocher kol hashmishi kerem. When Reb Meir expressed the words that includes all the tashmishi kerem, the chiddush is that it includes, which the Chachamim did not include, the tvuyei b'mechiras asada afilu hani tashmishin she'einon munachin b'soichai. So in our case, the Gemara is telling us that Reb Meir is adding items that service a field, even though right now they're not even in the field. They're being stored external to the field. Nevertheless, they are included in the sale, while the Rabbanan would hold they must be stored in the field in order to be considered part of the field. Right at the beginning of our parak, the Gemara said that maybe our Mishnah could be going according to Reb Meir, but that was kaviyah. We were talking about the konim, the posts that hold up the vines. There's kaviyah. Hani avni the achba, the misakni kari kvi. We call those kvum as well. Aval pi she'ein muchabar b'karka. Even though right now they're not even connected to the ground. As a matter of fact, they might even be off the ground. But I read kavun l'tashmish sadasu. Kavun doesn't mean it's embedded in the field. Kavun means its permanent use is primarily to service this field, whether or not they're physically in the field or not. You don't use them for any other field. They're not lent out. They're used exclusively for this field. That's the definition of kaviyah. Not actually in the field, not actually bound to the field. And the Rabbanan, the Amri, Leimochar called to Shmushi Kerem, Elam yuchad harbe latashmish. The Rabbanan say they have to be more connected. Einim korin elam kein machtan l'soichasa. According to the Rabbanan, these stones wouldn't be included in the sale of the property unless they're physically found inside the property. So let's see this again.
Stones, you don't know where these stones are.
No, everybody agrees they have to be misaknon and they have to be mizuman. So it has to be obvious that these stones are prepared for that use. They're probably not little pebbles, they're probably bigger stones.
They could be anywhere.
They could be, according to Rabbi, they could be anywhere. Well, chances are they're not going to be halfway across the globe. Chances are they won't be found halfway across the globe. They'll be found in a storage shed, maybe in the next property. Right? Just like the tools, the plow that he uses for that property, he might not keep it in that property. He might keep it in a barn in the next property. So I'm assuming it won't be far away, and it'll be obvious that these are.
We're talking about what's included without being stated.
Correct.
So we don't know.
No, it's known that every field where you plant grain would have these stones. And the buyer might say, where do you keep your stones? Right? And he would say, oh, they're in the shed next door. And I like that you're raising this question because you're highlighting what the chiddush of Rav Meir Shita is. Because I don't even see it. Maybe it's not in there. Where is it? Why would I assume that's included? Right? So Rav Meir said it's.
I know you have a pile of stones to build a fence.
Right. So we're still sticking with Ula. We'll get to us in a minute. Okay, I'm sorry. We're still sticking to what we say, which is the weights, the stones, the stone wall. I don't want to stonewall you, but the stone wall we're going to get to in just a minute. So as long as it's prepared and easily identifiable as the stones that belong to the field, then it's fine. Rabbanan who the machtan, they have to be there in the field. Ula, the Amar Avanim Hasaduris together. So according to Ula, we're talking about stones that would be eventually used for a gate. How do you know which ones are included according to Rabbanan and which ones according to Rav Meir? Rabbanan, the Misaklan Afagav Sadran. As long as they're prepared, even though they're not organized. So maybe, according to Rabbanan, it's only if it's neat in a pile on a skid, clearly a construction material ready to be used to build a wall, that will be included. But according to Rav Meir, even if you could tell these are blocks and not just loose stones, so they're prepared, but they're not organized, Rabbanan, who decided only if it's organized. I hope I'm right, because it doesn't sound like it actually has to be a fence, because then it's not stones, then it's a fence already. So it must mean it's an order, it's there to be able to be used. Let's have a look at the Rishbam. Ula probably is primarily referring to the Rabbanon because we run who we pass like. So Meir Lebein Sdurais Elo de Mesaknon Litzoyrech Geder Sadazu. Oh, so the Rishbam says not like me. The Rishbam says since Ula used the word Sadurais, he was referencing the requirement of the Rabbanon. But according to Meir, Avagav Loisidram Zu Agavzu. Why the Bechlakol Tashmishi Keremu? It is an integral component of the Kerem. Rabbanon Loi Mistavni Ad Sidron Lakach. I guess it's a much bigger thing to pile them up neatly in a pile, ready to be installed. Okay, so this is so far it's a stickle technical and dry so far. We'll see what happens. Zok the Gemara weiter. There's a konim shebekerem shein l'tzarchlei. Frag the Gemara konim my aviditai. Frag the Gemara. And the Rishbam explains beautifully. Matzrichen lekerem konim hamagdel mekarka. The Rishbam has the advantage over us that he didn't have the arch grow, so he didn't already see in the Mishnah what these konim were for. So he could come in with the Friedrichkeit and appreciate the Gemara's kasha. What do you need sticks for in a kerem? The konim stoma mashmalei b'mokem gidula k'moy chitzes hakonim. It's a mashma that konim are in the place of the growth. What in the world do you need sticks for where the vines are going to grow? So the Gemara, Amri Devei Rabbi Yanai, I'll tell you what these sticks are for. Konim ha-muchulakim shemamidim tachas ha'kefanim. they are nicely smoothed out and planed and sanded down konim that are made to be underneath the kafanim that support them. If they're sanded down and smooth, that would be enough of a preparation that they're exclusively servicing the karam, and therefore they will be included in the sale. And the Rabbanan hu the mukman. What is this extra mukman? So let's see how the Rishbam describes these sticks. They're smooth. To let the vine stand up. And this way the clusters of grapes will be suspended in the air by these sticks. Otherwise the vines won't stand up on their own. They'll be sitting on the floor and the clusters of grapes will get ruined. They're sanded down. So the Rabbanon, you know when these kalim are included, if they're already pounded into the ground and you walk into the karam and you see a row of sticks standing up, prepared for the vines to be supported on them. But if they're just lying there flat, they're not included, while the Reb Meir holds they would be included. So now I'm thinking either I could call today's year rolling stones, because the stones that are in the property, according to Rabbanan, but according to Reb Meir, even if they're rolled out of the property, they would be included. Or I can call them sticks and stones. May break my bones. Right? Call them sticks and stones. I know that the builders in H&R refer to the homes that they build in the home building division. They build many homes. They call them sticks and bricks. That's the term for the subdivision homes. Sticks and bricks. So we can call it sticks and bricks. Okay, zok the Gemara weiter. Vesatfu amuchuberes lakarka. What's the chiddush of that? Zok the Gemara v'alvagav dematoy lemichzad. Even though they're fully ready to be cut down, nevertheless, since they're not cut down at this moment, they're included in the sale. I know the Rishbam comments on this. Alvagav, the matoy lemichzad, the gizman ksirasa. So what's significant about that? Zok the Rishbam v'sogadai the chamina kol oimid liktzar kikotchadam. Since it's all ready to be cut, we might consider it already cut. Afilu hachi lagabe mechira b'chal sad. Lagabe other halachas, it might be considered kikotchadam. But the lagabe mechira, which is all totally in the das hamoicher and das loikeach, will be included. Uvidaloi matoi, if they weren't fully ready to be cut, they still need some growth there. Lo yitzrach l'muslim. That's for sure included in the sale. The pshitahi sharei asada moicher achshav lagamri. He's selling the field now completely. No one has a havam in it that I'll be able to keep as a moicher. I'll be able to let my tefua continue to grow in the field that I had already sold, so that I can have fully grown wheat. Surely he's not going to let me come in a week, and as my pears ripen, and I can't cut them right now. So the chiddush is, even if it's actually completely ready to be harvested, it's still included in the sale. The alimi, even though they're big, Zokrashi alimi, alvagav alimi. The Basra tfisis akakas. We don't care how big each plant is. We care how much space it takes up in the property. We're going through each clause of the Mishnah and commenting upon it. L'Reb Meir, it means it's loy misaknon. It's not even ready at all. And l'Rabbanan, it means loy machton. It might be ready, but it's not in the field. Together, and we're not talking about the weights. We're talking about fences. According to Reb Meir, it's not even set up to be used as a fence. Even if it's set up to be a fence, even if it's the stones are good to be used for a fence, but they're not set up properly. Reb Meir means the loy mishafyon. If it wasn't even sanded, they're still rough sticks. And the Rabbanan loy mukman, they might all be sanded, but they're lying in the field. They're not actually standing up in rows. Even though it still needs the land. In other words, that's the chiddush. As the Rashbam says, even though you still would want to spread it out of the field to dry out, to get ventilated from the smell of the karka. I might have. Where would I have skipped? I often do so. What's that? I might have. Yeah, I probably did skip that. Oh, I'm sorry, I did skip that. I apologize. Even though it's not permanently affixed and it's not bonded to the ground, it would still be included. Even though they're strong plants, we already learned the Rashbam that even though they're strong, healthy plants, it doesn't make a difference since they're not mature yet. Avol loy mochar es avodim she'enu es avonim she'enu tzarcha le'mered le'misakton le'rabonin le'mochton ulo the amar avonim masturus together le'mered le'misakton and le'rabonin le'saj. V'lo es hakadam shebekeren she'enu tzarcha le'mered le'mishavion le'rabonin le'mukmon. They're not set up standing. V'lo es atfula tushim nakarka the avagav the shricha la'ara. Even though they still need the property to be spread out, it's still not included. If there's a large plot of land in this field that the reeds are growing in, that would not be included as too distinct from the property. Even though the plants are small, we don't look at the size of the plant, we look at the size of the area that's different from the rest of the field. Chitzas hakonim is an example of some foreign thing that could be growing in this field, but it's not dafka that. Even if it's a row of besamim, different from the grain that would typically be grown there, and that patch of land is actually referred to with its own reference. It's a significant piece of property that would not be included in the sale of the wheat field. Amar Papa, the plant. That's only people actually refer to it. Oh, that rose garden, that cinnamon patch, oh, that strawberry patch. The strawberry patch, that's Yankel's. So in other words, it's identified as a separate piece of property. Let's have a quick look at the Rashbam. They'll have a base roiva, even if it wasn't a base roiva. Why? When people would plant certain beautiful smelling spices, it was normal that would be identified separately. But the Mishnah tells you up to a roiva is what's significant in konim, but other types of spices might have a smaller share. The most of the psikahi, you have a besrava yesh l'shem b'fnei v'loy loy. But other types of plants, the amount required to make them distinct might be smaller or bigger. Varda the planya arugas boishim shablani. This is the row of beautiful smelling spices of Yankel. That's how it's identified as a separate item. V'loy ha'shoymira ha'asuya b'tit. Even though it is it's bonded to the ground, it's not included in the sale. It's a significant item with to be sold separately. There's a little bit of a shiloh what this is, but the Rashbam learns, I believe it's the doorpost that was built around a typical gate or door. I'm not sure why those would be found in the field, but let's read the Rashbam inside. Boy Rabbi Lozer. Now that we brought up this discussion of things that are made with tit are considered independent and significant, and things that are just put together without tit are not so significant and might be included. That's why we raised this question over here. We're making a distinction between a frame that was just knocked together with nails versus after it was not covered with nails, it was also cemented over. So the Rishbam answers my first question: what's this doing in the field? It's not in the field. But now that we got into the distinction between just putting something together with an IKEA frame and doing much more, like smearing it over with a coating, we're seeing how it would be relevant in a regular house as well. The posts around the doorway. It's the full door frame. Would that be included in the sale of a house? So Zog to Gemara as follows. If they're all painted in, clearly they're one part and parcel of the house. My question is, they're only put together with nails and screws. What would be the law? Everything more take. We don't know if those are included. The windows also are the same type of frame as the doors. Would the shaila apply equally there? Do you say no? They're only made for beauty, and therefore, even if they're smeared around, it would be considered separate from the house. Dr. Moore, take. Let's see the Rishbam's explanation of this shaila. If you hold that the doorposts from a door, if they're merely nailed together, they are considered part and parcel of the house. When you make a doorpost, that design, it's a complete door frame, that's because it gives the house rigidity. That's much more structurally connected to the house. That might be connected. But if you have the window frames that are more for beauty, where they're not smeared, so we're saying not like what I said, they're not smeared, they're just nailed together, what would be the law? Do you say are they made for beauty? They're just an adornment, and therefore they're not included in the sale. They're not structurally part of the sale. Or maybe the fact that they're nailed together is enough to say that they become part and parcel of the house. That we're still maintaining with. That if it's smeared around with it, surely it's going to be connected to the house. Now we're going to ask a question. If you sell a bed, what is included in the sale of the bed? If you had these frames around the kari amita, mal. So what exactly are these frames? The Rashbam explains. The four legs of the bed, if they sat in the mud, because that's really what their floors were, they didn't have linoleum or ceramic in those days, so they would sit in the mud, and the bottom of the anyone who has a fence between their house and their neighbor knows what it means for a fence post to rot out. It sits there in the ground, eventually it rots out. So they didn't want the bottom of the beds in mud, so they took a block of wood, they carved out a little hole, and they would add it like what are those things that you put under the legs of your couch so it shouldn't scratch your floor? It acts like one of those socks. So at least those door frames, they might not be painted in, but they're at least nailed together. They're not connected at all to the bed, but they're made to protect the bed. The mafarish puzzle, when you sell a bed, you include those leg pieces. Now, do you say if it's connected, then it goes with it for sure. It's included. They're not connected to the bed. Mayu, woe be the lacha, and the Gemara take it. So if these socks are connected somehow to the legs of the bed and they're connected to the bed, they're included in the bed. But if they're loose pieces, would they be included? Take it. Zok the head of the Gemara. How do we know this halacha? Meaning, Dr. Rishbam, the charuv hamorkav and tzad nashikma are einam kar mechlal soda. Why would you say that they're not included in the sale? The chivan, the meshkechinan, the einam mechlal soda. Once we know they're not included, they're not part of a field. The meli yadinan, the afilim amar kol masha b'soicha einam karin. because the Mishnah says these items, even if you say Kol Masha B'Soicha, these items are not included. They're so different and distinct from the property that even though I include anything in the property, I'm not including those things. Take it to Ketani Mastichin, Benkach, Benkach, Lemocher, the Chol Masha B'Soicha, Loi Mahani, El L'Tfuye Tashmishin the Soda, She'enan Kvuin Kolkach. When you say Kol Masha B'Soicha, yes, you're adding more, you're being more inclusive, but only things that are still connected to the field, even though they're not so connected. But that's what it's for. They're made for the field. They're not so connected. So that inclusive language, are included. We're going to bring a right for the pasuk. The chashivi sada b'fnei. They're considered like a separate field, and therefore the Rashbam sets it up beautifully. If you have 3 fields, you sold the 2 outer fields and the one in the middle you didn't sell. I'm telling you all of the contents of those 2 fields. Nobody's going to argue that the 3rd field is included. It's a completely different thing. Because that's like one field distinct in between 2 fields. Not immediately. Where do you see they have the Shem of their own field? This is the transaction that Avraham Avinu had with Ephron when he bought the Ma'aris Machpelah. And let's look at the whole pasuk inside. It says, "Vayokom stay Ephron asher b'Machpelah, asher lefnei Mamre, hasoda v'hama'ora asher boy, v'chol ha'etz asher b'asada." It included all of the trees as well. But then the pasuk sticks in extra words that are seemingly redundant. Asher b'chol gevuloi savu, that are in the border all the way around. I mean, it's pretty inclusive already. Hasada v'ma'ora asher boi v'chol ha'etz asher b'asada. Is that not enough? What is this extra word asher b'chol gvul saviv? So let's have a look how the Gemara darshans. Amar Rav Amar Krav v'yokim she'efer asher b'machpelah misha tzarich l'gvul saviv. The only trees that were included were trees that the only way you know they're included is because they're within the perimeter that you identified, so they're part of the field. Yatu elu she'ein tzrichin l'gvul saviv. These very significant trees, if I say that I'm selling my sycamore tree, I don't need to give you borders. It's so distinct on its own, it wouldn't require that extra explanation. Let's see the Rashbam inside. So Vayokum to Ephron. Ephron mocher lo yasad el Avram. Ephron sold it to Avram. Bistama. K'dichsiv nosati kesef asar kach mimeni. V'kamahad lo Ephron eretz arba me'er shekel kesef over l'soicher, right? Vafilu achi. Even though they didn't really itemize every item that was going to be included in the field, Kan Avram called all the lamex. Avram was kind of all the trees in the field, like it says, V'yakom stay Ephron v'chol eit asher v'chol gevul hasoviv. Aydei kniyos hasoda stam kan nagam es kol hoylams. Avram bought all the trees in that field just by buying the field. V'hai asher v'chol gevul pro yisera. The last clause is really extra. And I would have known that it includes all the trees in the field. So the extra wording is Lumidris Asa to teach us a special limud, and that is we should tzarich ligvul oisani laniskan. Avram Taka did not get all the trees in the field. He only got the trees that you need the border to identify that those trees are part of this field. The tree ligvul saviv. In order, in order that no one could say those trees aren't on your property, they're my property, they're my trees. So how do I identify which trees are mine? By talking about the perimeter. Anything within that perimeter is mine, including any trees. The Hainu, and what type of trees are included? What type of trees require the perimeter to identify who they belong to? Smaller trees. She'ein lahem shem. They don't have their own independent name. Vadovar shechuach mi notam, and it's not remembered anymore years ago who might have planted these trees. They require a perimeter so that we can identify anything within that perimeter. These very, very large and noticeable trees, prominent trees, independent of anything, everybody will know who planted them, when they were planted. They're very, very imposing trees. We don't need to put a perimeter around them to know who they belong to. They stand alone on their own. So that's what you see from the pasuk. The trees that are included in the sale of a property are trees that you need the property perimeter to know what's included. But these prominent trees, they're definitely not included as part of the sale. Gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. As an aside, mikan lemitzorim minatayr. Here you see that mitzorim is minatayr. What does that mean? Shakoinis hasada kanes hamitzorim matm. Remember, the borders were areas that were either sunk in or raised. They were distinct from the field. But you see from here, when Avram Avinu bought the field, he included in the sale of the field, he also bought the borders of it. So you see that mitzorim included. And any trees that might be planted on that border area are included in the sale of a field. The mitzorim b'chlal soda, dachimash mesoviv, kol ha'ilonois hanatun b'karka meitzer. All of the trees that were planted on the land of the border area, to Savav Asoda, Kan Avram was also kind in his purchase of the Maris and Achpela. So you learn from Avram's purchase of the Maris and Achpela what would typically be considered in the sale of a field and what would not. Look, the very prominent trees. Amr Rabbi Yehuda, Haiman de Mazbin Ara Lechavre. If you were going to sell a property to your friend, Tzorach Lemichtav Lei, Knilach, Diklin, Vitalin, Vahutin, Vitzitzin. I'm selling you the larger the column and the larger trees, and the younger the column and the younger trees. Even though he would be kind of all the trees in the property anyway, even without specifying this language in detail in the star, it's good to write a star clear so that it would be very obvious what's included. So even though we would include it anyway, because that's the policy, that's the norm, nevertheless, it's better if it's mentioned beferish. Amalei, what if he wrote the following? Ara land, and in addition to the land, fidikli and the column. The mute of the column is two. So chazinon we see, dikli, if he has in the property the column, yoiv dikli, he has to give to the column. Be less late if he doesn't have any, then Zovin lay tradically. He has to go buy to the column elsewhere because that's part of what his contract is. But the question is, what do you mean? What if he has more than two? What if he has more than two? So let's have a quick look at the Rashbam. He is ledikla yoiv le tradically. Zok to Rashbam levad oisen shebesoda hamuchur mechal chasoda. So when he said, "I'm selling you a field with a dikli," he means I'm selling you two dikli in addition to any dikli that are already in the field. The mechira acher sizu. We look at it like two separate items that are sold. There's the field and there's the column that are extra. Okay, Kavalti. Let's see the Gemara weiter. The imishabdi, what if there are the column included in the sale, but they're meshuba to amava? For instance, the seller had borrowed money from somebody and gave these trees to the malva to eat the pears, right? We had such a thing. So he's selling something, but it's the malva eating the pears. The halach is park loy tradically. He will have to redeem those from the malva because he has to deliver them to his purchaser. What if he says Arabic? I'm selling you a piece of property that has the column. That's no longer saying that I'm adding the column. It's identifying what property is. It's the property that has the column. So Chazinan, we see, Yisbadikli, Yoivle. If it has the column, then this property meets the contract's description, and you give it to him. If not, it's a mekachtos. We know even though the property is worth way more or way less, it goes through. That's correct. But this is misidentified. I said I would tell you property A, but this isn't property A. Property A has the column. This doesn't. There, it would be bottleneck. What about if he said Arabedically? Arabedically means a healthy field that can produce healthy trees. Less ledically, if it doesn't have the column. Let's look at the Gimel. I think it should evolve. Less ledically, my timer the chazal. So even if it doesn't have the column, it will be a good sale. The chazi ledically karmelet. I only meant to say this is good soil, and it'll be a property that you'll be able to plant healthy decolumn. Amerlei levar medikla plan. What if there's a whole bunch of decolumn in the property, and he pointed to one specific decal and says, "This decal I'm not including in the sale." Chazina we see. Idik latavahu, if it's a good dekel, that means shayure shayare. And the rest, even if it's not the best, but if it's a good one, you could say he wants to at least keep the one for himself that's a good one. But idik labishahu, if the one that he said I'm excluding from the sale is a very poor one, then what he means is I'm keeping all of the color. He means I want every single decal, including that one that is a very poor quality. What if he said I'm selling you the property, but I'm not selling you the trees? If there are trees in it, then yeah, that's what he meant. He's not including those trees. But what if I say levar me'ilani and there's no regular trees in it, but there are dikli in there? So isle dikli, levar me'dikli. We'll say he referred to the column using the word ilani. Isle gufni. What if there's no trees and there's no palm trees, but there's gufni, there's vines? Then we'll say when he said levar me'ilani, he meant to say levar me'gufni. What if there's ilani v'gufni? Then it's levar me'ilani. What if there's side trees and side vines? And he said levar me'ilani. Clearly, he only wants to retain the trees for himself, but he is giving the vines up. Ilani v'dikli. What if there's ilani v'dikli? Again, levar me'ilani. He probably meant only to withhold the ilanim, not the dekolim. But what if it's guvni v'dikli? He said levar me'ilani, and there are no regular trees. There's only vines and dekolim. So which one does he mean? He means to hold back the gefen. Why? Because normally a person refers to gefen as a tree before a person would refer to a dekel as a tree. Zokt the Rishbam here. We say that had the column machar vagafanim shir. When he said levar meilani, he had in mind the gefanim to withhold for himself, not to the column. Why? The gefanim legabe, the column nikroin ilani. Uvechlal ilani ain't femi dikli. Keiner be'enai. I guess the derech is if a person would sooner refer to a vine as a tree than he would to a dekel as a tree. Okay, gewaltig. Any tree that's big enough, we're talking about a dekel, any dekel that's big enough that you need a rope to climb up to get the pears from it, which are all the way at the top, that would be considered that he's holding for himself. But if it's a small little sapling, he wouldn't hold it for himself. And the Rashbam tells us that Rav is referring to something before. What if it's levar me'ilani and there are these dekolim in the field? A small little sapling, he's not planning to hold back for himself. He's only holding back for himself a dekel that's big enough that you would need a rope to scale it to cut down its pears. Okay, we'll stop here, Be'ez Hashem, and tomorrow we will learn Taf Ayin, but tomorrow we're going to be learning at 6 o'clock, not at 7 o'clock.